Welcome back. I know I left you on a cliffhanger on the last one, so if you haven't watched part one already, please go make sure you watch that. But before we get to the video, happy 2025, first video of the new year, and I've decided to do something a little bit interesting. If we're able to get this channel up to 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2025, then I'll take $1,000 to a cash game, play that, run the money up, and I'll stream it all. That way y'all can watch it. So if you have any friends or family or anybody that is interested in poker or wants to learn more, send them my way and let's get those subscribers up and let's try and hit 1,000 before 2026. With all that being said, let's get back to the video. I know you've been waiting on it, so let's see it.
Alright, starting where we left off, I look down at Ace Jack of Spades under the gun, and I raise up to 1600 and I only get one caller. So all that happened. Anyways, the turn comes, he bet 8,000 and I decide to call, and the river brings the 4 of diamonds. So I check and he ends up checking back quick. And so I table thinking I'm good, but he has ace king. Such a brutal run out. This next hand, we look down at ace 10 offsuit in the button position, and it folds around pretty quick all the way over to the hijack, who ends up deciding to raise to 2,000. I decide to call, and when the small blind folds, the big blind actually decides to call. So we end up going 3 ways in position to the flop. When the flop comes 10-5-5 with 2 hearts, I'm not really feeling too confident. I do have top pair, but the 2 hearts being out there and me not having anything doesn't really feel good. But for some reason, I decided to bet out for 3,500. And the big blind ends up deciding to call, but the hijack ended up folding really quick. So I don't know what I was doing with my hands just there, but anyways, when the big blind calls, the turn ends up bringing the queen of hearts. So the heart draw does end up getting there. Definitely scary for me. I decide to check after the big blind checks, and then we just head straight to the river, which is the jack of spades. So I completely miss here. You know, there's a lot of things beating me here. Ace queen, ace jack, even like king queen, king jack, all that kind of stuff. So he ends up checking and I decide to bet for 5k. That's not enough if I'm trying to buy this. I should have hit like 15 or 20 or all in at that point. But he ends up calling and yeah, he had ace jack. Alright, now going to the next hand, after a table move, we look down at pocket aces. So, very happy to see that. I decide betting 4 big blinds, so up to 4,800, and my buddy to the left, Rick, you'll actually see him in a future video, he ends up being the only one to decide to call. And in the moment, I'm pretty sure he said something along the lines of, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm donating chips, but it's going to a good person. So I don't know if that's considered, you know, cheating or like giving each other knowledge or anything like that. I don't know. But anyways, he calls and the flop ends up bringing 10-4-2 with 2 hearts. So this absolutely smashes my range. I decide to bid again for 7,500. And then after that, he folds pretty quick. So I'm not too upset about it, but it was a good hand. If aces wasn't that great in that last hand, then now we get to look down at pocket jacks in the under the gun position. So I decided to raise it up 3 big blinds to 3,600. I'm trying to do a little bit of experimenting with my raise sizes and everything. I probably could have gone for 4,000, but a 36 just kind of felt right in the moment. And my buddy Rick ends up calling, and then the button player actually ends up raising it up to 8,000. So very interesting play. When the small blind and big blind end up folding, I call and Rick decide to call as well. So now we're 3 ways out of position heading to the flop, which ends up bringing queen 5-3 with 2 spades. So We end up checking, and then the button ends up actually betting like 30,000, like something massive. And so I'm sitting here pretending that this is a tough decision, but really, I mean, with a queen out there, if he had ace king, ace queen, that stuff definitely hits him. And with jacks, there's no right way of playing them. So I'm pretending like I have a tough decision here, but I do end up deciding to fold. So yeah, that ends up pretty much being that. So this next hand is definitely a very interesting one. I look down at ace jack of diamonds under the gun, and with blinds at 8, 16, I decide bumping things up to 4,600, just adding a little 3K on top, nothing too major. And everyone ends up deciding to fold except for the big blind, and he just ends up deciding to call, which is interesting, and we'll see why later. So now we're going heads up to the flop, and we see that it is ace 4 3 with 2 clubs. He ends up checking. I decide betting out for 6K, and he thinks about it a little bit, but ends up deciding to call. I'm thinking he's trying to stick around to see a club. I'm not really too sure. But when the turn brings the Queen of Hearts, that doesn't really scare me. So when he checks back again, I decide to check as well, try and kind of slow play it. And then the river brings another queen. So I upgrade to 2 pair with a jack kicker. And he ends up betting out pretty big, basically putting me all in. And I'm thinking if he had some kind of missed clubs with like a high ace, then he probably thinks he's good. And I was right. He ended up having ace 10. So I got a full double up, and that was an amazing hand for me. So now we got some chips to work with. After another table change, we look down at pocket fours on the button, and when the under the gun decides to raise to 5,000, the hijack ends up deciding to call, and I call as well, along with the big blind. So now we are heading 4 ways to the flop. The flop comes 9-6-3 with 2 hearts. So definitely missed this one here. Big blind, under the gun, and the hijack all end up deciding to check after a little bit of thinking. And I decide to check back pretty quick as well. The turn ends up bringing the 2 of diamonds, so there's still no flush there. I do pick up extra outs for a straight, but when it checks around again, I'm not feeling confident about betting here, so I check again, and the river ends up bringing the 10 of hearts. So the flush gets there, 7-8 gets there for the straight. I'm not really worried about anybody except for the big blind having that. But the under the gun player decides to bet out for 8,000. And so when he does that, the hijack is sitting there and she's thinking about it for a while. And the only thing I'm thinking right now is, can you please hurry up and call or fold? That way I can get out of here. But she ends up looking back down at her cards again, and she ends up deciding to call. And of course, I get out of there, and I think it was flush over flush. I'm not really too sure, but I got out of there, and I don't have a lot of chips. Not only did we get another table change, but we are at the final table. So final table with the short stack. In the big blind, I look down at ace king offsuit. Definitely this is the place for me to go all in. If there's anything that short stacks need to be doing at final tables is going all in with very strong hands, especially since this is the first or second hand of the final table. I don't really have a table image up yet, except for the other regulars that I've played here with often. So when I go all in, the button ends up thinking about it for a while, and he's deliberating. He's trying to stare me down and try and intimidate me, but he and I are buddies, and I know that we're just kind of messing around. But after a lot of thinking about it, he does end up deciding to fold. So unfortunate, but probably for the best. I get to survive for one more hand. I show just because we're having fun, and yeah. Now we go into the very next hand. In the small blind, I look down at ace queen of clubs. So I'm waiting for it to get around to my turn. And you remember what I was saying about going all in with strong hands? Well, you can probably guess on what I'm about to do. So when it ends up folding around to the middle position, he actually ends up deciding to bet to 6,000. And then when the hijack ends up calling, I say, sweet, let's ship it. So I go all in, big blind folds, and the middle position, he ends up thinking about it for a while. If I remember correctly, he was probably like the next shortest stack or maybe another one ahead. But anyways, if he made this call, it would be a pretty decent amount of his chips. So he does end up deciding to call. And then the hijack, after thinking about it for a while, he does end up deciding to fold. So we're heads up, and he actually had my last hand. He had ace king. So we're not looking good. We're going to need to get lucky here. We end up going to the flop, and of course, the dealer here, Nick, he loves to have a little slow roll. With a suspenseful slow roll, we see it as Jack 10-7. Turn brings a 5, and the river ends up bringing a jack. So I am out.
Thank y'all so much for watching this video. It was great making a final table. Unfortunately, I did not cash, but you know, sometimes it happens. If y'all could please like and subscribe again, that would be greatly appreciated. And I'll see y'all in the next one.